What is going on, you guys? So, hope you're having a great day today. Today, we're going to talk about the actual spreadsheet, the Google Sheets, which is actually available for you guys to download now. A lot of you guys have been asking me a lot of questions, so I figured I'd make this video to clarify some of it for you. And if you see it on the YouTube channel, you might be more inclined to watch it a little bit to see if it can answer some of your questions. So, some of the folks ask if it's fully automated, if it basically pulls everything directly from, say, your Fidelity account, Charles Schwab account. And so hopefully this video takes care of some of those questions for you guys, as well as shows how easy it is to set up something like this for yourself. So if you actually wanted to take the time and build this on yourself, feel free to pause throughout the video. But that being said, and in my opinion, it's probably one of the better products out there compared to some of the other products, which are sometimes we've seen up to $400 a year and sometimes up to $50, $60 a year. So, and I think it's almost as simple as utilizing some of the fancier trackers that are out there that still make you manually input some of your data. But like I said, once a lot of this stuff is manually inputted, you get a ton of information coming from Yahoo, from Google Finance, and basically forecasts out your monthly income and a whole bunch of other things. So if you're interested, feel free to stay on. I know this video is not going to be for everyone, so I apologize that this video might not necessarily be for you. But for those of you that are interested, stay tuned for after the introduction and we'll get right into it. All right, guys, so hopefully you guys are very familiar with the Google Sheets at this point, and if not, I previously utilized Apple iCloud to create some of these fancy dashboards that you can utilize to track your portfolio, whether it's dividend income or whether it's day over day prices, or how you basically have your portfolio set up with respect to income and capital allocation and a lot of those things. So the hope is to kind of walk through this in a little bit more depth for you guys, so that way we can really hone in on if this is something that you want to build on your own, or is it something you want to buy from me and Kyle, or if this is something that just interests you and you're curious as to how to make a dashboard for maybe something else other than investing in stocks. So it starts off relatively simple. It's a whole bunch of different, basically, references. Cells basically reference all over each other. There's a bunch of formulas in here to kind of set up the different ways to split up all your different portfolios by sector, by value, by income, the yield by sector. And all this basically is a whole bunch of different formulas. And basically what I did is look up, I guess, the main formulas that I generally utilize, which is cash, ETFs, and then all the 10 or 11 other different sectors that I generally speaking get into. And this is kind of the simplified overview version of the portfolio tab, which gets a little bit more in depth. So if we were to kind of take a zoom out of this, there's about 5 or 6 different columns that you enter in here, most of which are one time and one time only, and a few that you might have to update as you continue to get more shares, if you buy on a dip or anything like that. But most of the time, if you just buy and hold, it will probably stay that way for up to months at a time, and everything will be completely automated for you, which we'll kind of get into. So one of the key things that I want to get into before we actually talk about the manual stuff is things like figuring out what your annual dividend is, the annual percentage yield, the yield on cost, the ex-dividend date for things that are coming up, next pay date, expected payment that you're going to get on that next quarterly or monthly income, how much you should expect annually, your cost basis, market value, gains, with a little bit of data validation in here to give you some green and reds to let you know where you are in the portfolio. If you want to get a little bit more in depth with dividend history and stuff like that, we have the link here for you to kind of go into different stocks to look at. Each of them kind of comes up here, so hopefully that helps a little bit. Market cap, and then you kind of get into more of the less specific about your position, but more about the stock itself, and things like market cap, earnings per share, PE, price to open, 52-week high, 52-week low, what percentages you are off of those things, the beta, shares outstanding, how much you own of the company, delay, should you buy, hold, some small trial things that I'm doing. And of course I have all these things bunched up here, and that's as an example, but just to show you guys how nice Google Sheets is comparatively to some other things. You can actually move these around relatively quickly, and it's not going to break any of the links within the Google Sheet. So if you were to move around annual dividends, which is referenced a bunch throughout this entire process, it's not going to mess anything up. That's not going to mess up any of the references. Same thing with X dividend date. If you were to be moving it around, it's not going to mess anything up. You can move it around, and you'll still be able to get the forecasted dividends like you would want, and it's not going to give any reference errors. You're still going to get the fancy month over month sort of dividend graphs. So hopefully that is a nice little upgrade from what we had in iCloud. iCloud was a little bit more finicky with respect to those sorts of things. So actually inputting what you need, so there's about 6 or 7 columns you need to add. Like I said, you generally just add them once and you're done, and everything kind of gets forecasted unless you add another position. And so that being said, I think you have about 75 spaces at the moment for adding different stocks in here, because I have basically a bunch of different stocks and a bunch of different portfolios. Sometimes I own the same stock in multiple portfolios, but it's a different story for a different day. So all you'd have to put in here, for instance, is ABBV, and what we can do is kind of erase it and show you what exactly goes away. So everything that is built off of ABBV kind of goes away. You still have cost basis because obviously that's somewhat manual, but everything in here that you're seeing, so the average shares that were sold, the volume for that day, the delay, the price, ownership of the company, that all goes away because it's based off of this essential little criteria here. And so that just goes to show you how much of it is just off of one single cell. And a lot of these other things here are just to basically forecast out or to understand how much kind of dividends you're coming into every single quarter. And so like I said, we have it split up into your next pay date, your next expected payment. So this is basically saying, okay, 138 bucks for 117 shares that you have, this is what you should be expecting to get paid once it kind of comes through. And so if you want to follow it, we should expect our next payment here in May 15th of $138, and we can follow that to the forecasting tab here. Go to AbbVie, and you can see $138 here in May. Now you can see up top here, there's a whole bunch of different tables that I've kind of built and hid for you guys, and it says here, do not delete. This is kind of important. But basically what it does is it pulls the ex-dividend date, and then you basically manually input, is it a quarterly payer? Is it monthly? Does it pay semi-annually? And based off of what this date pulls, it'll forecast out essentially what payments are going to be in here. So you can see I already received a payment from AbbVie in February, so I locked it in. You have to manually change this from the, let's say, 138 to the 121, which is what I got paid. And because of that dividend reinvestment, as well as a dividend raise, it's now going to be $138. So when it gets to May timeframe and I get my $138.64, I would then just type that in. That gets rid of the formula, and that kind of allows you to track for tax reasons or just to see how you're increasing your dividends through time. And that kind of allows you to see on a monthly basis and on a position basis what kind of income you're receiving. So on a monthly basis, allows you to roll up every single dividend that you have in your entire portfolio. And yeah, so that's basically it. I mean, and just to kind of show you how it's kind of linked up here, if we were to erase this here, the AbbVie position again, you can see a lot of these columns disappear, but also all the income that you were going to get disappears as well. So if you sell the position, that is potentially useful for you because it automatically will erase that from your entire portfolio, no needing to kind of come in here and erase all of it. And also you have your initial position that you had in February when you got paid, because you recorded it and you kind of went through. So hopefully that's a little bit helpful, and that's a little bit better than what we had in iCloud, because you kind of had to manually set it up. And so one of the biggest pains I think that a lot of people endured getting the iCloud version is a lot of these names and everything would show up automatically, but they didn't recognize that they had to kind of put all these dividends forecasted in by themselves. And so I had basically the quarterly payment that you would need, but they didn't want to go in and put in, okay, it's going to pay me in February, it's going to pay me in May. They didn't like that aspect of things. So I can understand that, and that's why we kind of made the Google Sheets version, because we're trying to continually make things better and let you guys know that we're listening to you. Another nice thing is it allows you to put in what your account is. And so if you have an account, let's say you want to change this to Matt's IBA. That's fine if you want to, rename it. The only thing is if you were to go in there and you wanted to change it to Matt's IBA, it's relatively simple. You just have to go in here and change this to Matt's IBA, and it would be able to track it pretty easily, might I add. And so you get to see that's the AbbVie amount of income that we would expect is at $554. So that's not a big deal. And you can see it goes back to $6,700 or so when I change it. And if I were to change this back to IBA and go back to the overview tab, we're back up to $7,000, which is the amount that we were missing when we took out AbbVie and allocated to something different. So that being said, that kind of helps, and you'd have to do the same with consumer or the sector kind of tab that you have here. So looking at sector, that is here. This is also manual. You'll have to input this as well. But hopefully it's relatively simple for you guys and you kind of understand what sector each company is in. So AbbVie obviously is in healthcare. BlackRock is in financials. Bank of Nova Scotia is a bank, so it's in financials. You have BP, that's in energy. So it's somewhat intuitive, and you can fill out a lot of these relatively simple and relatively quickly without having to even look them up. Sometimes if you get in trouble, just go on Yahoo Finance and it'll pick it up right away. Maybe in the future, what I can do is automate it a little bit for you guys. And that's another thing, is this is just kind of the first version that we have of Google Sheets. And so what I'm going to continually do is add on to it every single time. So if that's the case and you're curious if I've updated it, you're always going to have the link of the original. So obviously if you were to purchase this and download it, you have the link to the basically copy version. You basically would just go in to file and basically make a copy here, and you would get the copy. Now this is my personal version, so I'm kind of working off of that. But that being said, if there were any updates, like if I were to update this sector thing in a month's time or something like that, where I automatically go to Yahoo and update this so it pulls the sector automatically, all you would have to then do is basically copy these tabs and these other 2 or 3 tabs, put it into your sheet, and hopefully the sector would automatically update for you guys if you were to go to that old tab and make another copy. So that's pretty cool, because you'll always get a consistent update if something gets better. And you might look at it and be like, well, I don't really want that, so I'm not going to copy and paste my old stuff over. But if it's something that's really cool, really revolutionary, like some of the other stuff that we're working on, like trying to get buys and sells based off of certain criteria within here, that might be something that you're interested in, and you could essentially keep up with that. And that's basically free for you guys to get a consistently updating sheet, which is somewhat different from what we had in iCloud. That being said, the only other things you really have to add in here are how many payouts per year. I kind of mentioned that as well. So if you're getting paid monthly, you put in the 12. If you're getting paid quarterly, you put in 4. Price paid per share, so that's manual. So for you guys that buy like a share every month or so, it might be a little bit difficult. But for me, who generally tries to buy 100 or larger positions, maybe 20, 30 shares at a time, it becomes a little bit more simple. The shares original, for those of you guys that reinvest your dividends, this is basically how many shares you've purchased yourself. So if you were to go in and buy, say, 200 shares here of Bryn Mawr Bank Trust, which is a local bank that I grew up with, you basically say, okay, well, I bought 200 shares outright for $36.60. And now I've reinvested over the past 1 or 2 quarters. Now I have 203 shares. So you wouldn't really be changing this 200 unless you were to physically go out and buy, let's say, another 100 shares, another 200 shares. Then you might say this is $200. You might adjust your price paid per share because it's now an average of, say, both of those. But what you'd probably be updating on a constant basis or a quarterly basis whenever you get paid dividends is a shares now button. So you'd go to Fidelity, you'd go to your Merrill Edge and say, okay, well, now I have 204 shares. What does that do? And so everything will update with respect to that change that you made. You've gone up in your annual payout from 211 to 259, or $211.59 to 212 or whatever it ended up being, and it's relatively quick, relatively consistent, kind of goes through the portfolio relatively seamlessly. So that being said, I mean, once you kind of have those things up and running, the only thing you need to maintain and keep track of these single sectors and inputs that you have in here for manual is really just forecasting. And all you would have to do is when you look and you see at an end of the month, you kind of look into your Fidelity or your Merrill Edge or your Robinhood, and you say, okay, this company paid me $138. This company paid me 173, and you would type it in, make it red, make it yellow, whatever you want to let you know that you kind of made it and you got paid. And that makes it relatively simple. And you already have 2021 built out for you guys as a model, and you can easily do the same if you wanted to create for 2022. And one of the key things that I want to highlight, and a lot of people do this, Google Sheets works exactly like Excel, and it works exactly like iCloud Numbers. If you go in and you delete one of these rows here, it's going to throw a fit with respect to reference errors that you see people having all the time. And people message me all the time about this. They say, hey, there's a reference error in here. I don't understand where it came from. If you sell a position like I have here, I sold Icon Enterprises a while ago. It's easy enough to just go in here, go all the way in here, hit the delete button, erase everything that's in here, and easily just go all the way to the left and hide it. You know what I mean? And you won't see it anymore. You won't have any problems with it anymore. Everything will still work. And if that's such a big problem, then I don't know what to tell you. All you really have to do is go in here and hide, and that's relatively it. And the same goes for inserting a link. If you insert a link, it's easy enough to kind of just copy and paste some of these things down, because a lot of these things are linked. So you have 77 or so different cells to kind of play with. If you buy a company, you can easily just copy and paste some of these down and basically add in an additional one here. And that's really how you would go about doing something like that. And of course, you have the formulas within here. So if you want to copy it or say add an additional company, everything will kind of move with you if you do it correctly. But if you kind of delete, like I showed you, you'll throw a reference error, and that's fine if you're cool with living with reference errors, but I generally like to keep these things pretty clean, and generally reference errors kind of compound on each other. So it's really not too difficult, and hopefully this video allows you to kind of understand that it's relatively simple to add more stocks if you need them. But if you just take your time and do it systematically, it's relatively simple. Another cool thing is once you kind of come in here and have your information in here, you can do a little bit of analysis. So you can do some January analysis versus 2019 versus 2020. Now, of course, you can add in 2018, if you have all the way back to 2012, 2009, feel free to go ahead and do that. I just have 2019 in here because I'm basically starting anew. Previous data, I have that in my basically long-term growth, but what I'm more so focusing on, if you wanted to kind of focus on the long-term growth aspect of things, kind of have this here. But I really want to focus on is year-over-year growth, and basically am I meeting my next 1 year, 2 year targets. And there are some things in here where I can hopefully grow to, let's say, see what my long-term growth rates are and stuff like that, but I haven't gotten to that part yet, and that doesn't come with the sheet at the moment, but I might add it if people think it is useful. So if it is, leave that in the comment section down below. But this allows you to do year-over-year growth calculation. So just for instance, you can see January was down year over year, and that's based off of some different payments that I saw. So some of this stuff is already set up for you from 2019, 2020 to 2021, and it's not too difficult. If you wanted to add 2022, you just add a column here, click and drag, basically reference some of these columns. It's not too difficult. If you were to make a 2022 table, you just kind of go in here, go to your forecasting. Let's just say this is it. You just click it, and you click and drag down, and boom, you got it all set up, and you're able to kind of go over here and do the same. And it's really not too difficult to do that as long as you take your time. And everything else other than that will be basically automated, aside from the small little tips and tricks that I'm showing you with respect to the portfolio tracker. So that also being said, if you have these VLOOKUP tables here, you have everything kind of made for you. The only thing I would say is if you want to change the names of these things, that's fine. just make sure when you're looking in here, you change the formula as well to read the different things. I tried getting it to read specifically this text box, but I was having issues doing that. So maybe in a future version, I can see if I can get that to work. But it's relatively nice to be able to look at your portfolio and say, hey, this is how much I have in this sector. That might be too much. I mean, a lot of times when I first started doing this, I was like, I have way too much in energy stocks. I can do that. It's bright yellow. I can see that, from a mile away, and really started to work on getting some of these other sectors up. And so it really allowed me, I think at one point, my income was over 45% coming from energy stocks, and it was over 30% in terms of value. And this has really allowed me to be like, holy crap, I'm not diversified. I have no industrials. I have zero materials stock. I have zero information technology stock. I really need to fill out some of these gaps. And there's a bunch of good companies that are in those sectors that I just unfortunately completely ignore for, say, energy at the time, or say for Wells Fargo at the time for financials. So I think sometimes what we do is we see a certain stock, we know a little bit about it, we get fixated on it. There's nothing wrong with that, but I think you need to recognize that you need a tool to at least help you understand if you're kind of over diversifying into a specific sector. And if you're doing that knowingly, that's not a problem either. Warren Buffett has 50% of his stock in finance stocks. Keep in mind he has other businesses that kind of balance that out. So he has, other energy stocks that kind of help that. So he doesn't necessarily need to invest in energy stocks to get that sort of diversification because he owns physical businesses, not necessarily just company stock. But yeah, that sort of helps as well. Small things like yield on cost, dividend yield, that allows you to understand basically, portfolio wide what you want to do. Like I mentioned earlier, it splits into how much you have in each one of these portfolios here with respect to income value, to kind of see, are you over, say, investing in one particular account versus another, or how one strategy is doing versus another. And so hopefully those are cool little things for you guys to see. Cool little tidbits as well. You can kind of see what income you're getting on a daily basis with respect to how it changes. If you get a dividend raise, it happens relatively quickly. As soon as basically NASDAQ updates their website, you'll be able to get it here. You get monthly dividend estimates based off of the average that you see here. And you can see and forecast, the monthly totals that you'd be expecting here and what you could expect if you were to reinvest some of those dividends for next year and to see, what you're going to be getting paid. You can do a lot of cool stuff in here. And the one thing that I ask of you guys is to really talk to me and Kyle. If you have any suggestions about something, whether it's even this related or not, if it's just a portfolio sheet or if it's, say, a real estate sheet, we're happy to talk to you guys about it and try to help you guys where we can. And so it's not just going to help you if you ask us, it's also going to help the community. And that's more the reason why we do this stuff. We do it to add value to the community, let people understand how they're doing, and let people take control of their own finances. And so we're really hoping that this adds a little bit of value to you guys. And it's a cheaper option than a lot of things that are out there. And it's relatively automated. There are some minor things that you have to set up, but I think that's going to have to happen with any single one of these portfolio trackers. And to be honest, this one's quick. It's always going to be consistently updating, and you're never going to have to pay $400 a year. And I think that's one of the cool things that I want to highlight, because one of the guys that we follow, and Bruce Wang's a great guy, and he does a really good job, and he's got a really good portfolio set up, and he's got a really good YouTube set up as well. But one of the things he kind of shows is, hey, I have this tracker and it's $400 a year, and it's really cool, but at the same time it's $400 a year. It might make sense for somebody like myself, who kind of is now making around $12,000, $13,000 a year in dividend income, let alone what I'm making in YouTube and other things like that, to utilize something like that. But for some people that are just starting out, it doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense. And so hopefully that was enough of a rant, and hopefully it was enough that you guys can kind of make your own sheet if you really wanted to take the time and build it piece by piece. You can do that off of this video. That's perfectly fine, but it's probably going to take you a couple hours. Me knowing how to do this even took a couple hours just because there's a lot of intricacies and figuring out a lot of how being able to pull data off of HTML took a little bit of time as well. So you can do the research. Sometimes a specific site might work, sometimes it might not. And so it takes a little bit of trial and error. And so what I can promise you guys is if you basically stick with us, sit with me and Kyle, we'll be able to hopefully continually update the spreadsheet as people give us ideas, as people point out things that aren't necessarily working. And you'll always have a link with respect to Google Sheets. You'll always have a link to the latest project that we're working on if you want to add that to your portfolio, or you say, you know what, I'll wait till the next time we give an idea as to what an opportunity is there. And hopefully this is cool enough that you guys share it with your friends. You're able to say, hey, we found these two guys that are on YouTube that are doing this really cool project, and it's allowed me to kind of change the way I view my portfolio, which doing this for my portfolio drastically changed it. I remember doing this for the first time in 2014 timeframe. Granted, I had a lot of the portfolio trackers and dividend tracking and stuff like that, but actually viewing the VLOOKUP table like this and seeing how much the portfolio was by value and by income, it really just changed everything for me. So enough of a rant. Hope that was a good video for you guys. Hopefully, if you don't want to download it from me, I understand. Hopefully you can build it yourself, and hopefully it doesn't take you a couple hours. And especially if you guys are relatively new to building sheets, well, it's going to take you some time, and hopefully at the end of the day you have something to fall back on if you still truly want to have a tool that can help you guys better your portfolio and hopefully manage your portfolio a little bit better. So thanks guys, I'll talk to you soon and see you on the next video. Cheers.